Welcome into the circle that is Boston University School of Theology. Welcome into a circle that loops back to 1839 and glows on this day with alums who graduated 1, 5, 40, and 65 years ago. With new students who bring to STH their unique gifts, passions. With new staff who lead and cultivate liveness in this place. With new faculty whose teaching and research and presence edify and inspire. And with our returning community who entered this new year as new people. People who have learned and changed over the summer and now enter into a new year ready to face new challenges and opportunities. Welcome to this circle. The people in our circle who graduated in 1969 and just before and after were in the School of Theology when the world faced disasters, racism, war, poverty. They witnessed the tragedies of Martin Luther King Jr.'s and Robert Kennedy's assassinations. They witnessed the raging of the war in Vietnam and the protection of a conscientious objector in this very chapel. Didn't last as long as they hoped it would. They witnessed the flourishing of an ecumenical movement that sought to bring churches together to witness their faith in and for the world. We now enter STH in a 2019 world facing disasters, racism, homophobia, war, poverty, climate disaster, divided churches, and interreligious prejudices. You have already witnessed tragedies in this past year, mass shootings even in churches, synagogues, and mosques. You have witnessed tragedies of global warming and of nations and groups of ordinary people in vitriolic war with one another. And yet the circle invites you in. You are people who follow Jesus. You are also Jews and Muslims, Buddhists, Unitarian Universalists, and many other traditions. You are from many cultures and countries. You are unique, and you make the circle of the School of Theology unique. And now the circle holds you and encourages you to be your unique and precious selves, to learn and grow together, to stretch the boundaries of knowledge, to make space in the circle for quirks and quarrels and questions, to value every precious one in the circle and beyond, to make music and to dance, and to stretch the circle ever wider, opening it to embrace one another and all the circles you represent and the entire world. The circle welcomes you. Welcome to the circle that is BU School of Theology. May this circle radiate love and justice and hope to a community, a university, and a world that need us badly. Let us pray. God of sun and rainbows, rain and soil, we give you thanks for the grandeur of your creation. And we ask your strength and blessings to help us be co-creators, co-caregivers with you. God of delight and struggle, despair and hope and courage, we give thanks for your presence, your movement in our lives and far, far beyond, under, over, all around. And we ask you to bless our own journey as we move through despair and struggle, hope and courage. God, may you bless us in this year, and may you give us the peace and the love for which we deeply yearn. Amen. We're moving now to the passing of the peace, but before we do that, I would like to say a couple of words about our preacher for the day. We are so blessed that Walter Fluker has agreed to be our preacher in this Matriculation service. He will preach Spirit, and we will be gifted by that Spirit. This is Walter's last year with us. He is retiring at the end of this year, and we are trying to enjoy every single moment of his presence and to draw from his deep knowledge and inspiration so that we might ourselves carry on the traditions that he has helped establish here. Two things I'll add to what's in the bulletin, and that is that during his 10 years here, Walter Fluker has completed the Howard Thurman Papers Project, the 5th and last book being published last year. Actually, I lied. It was published this year. He also has published a book that is having enormous influence in religious and public communities and in the Black church. And the title of that book is The Ground Has Shifted, The Future of the Black Church in Post-Racial America. We are so grateful that Walter's willing to be with us today in this particular way. And now, I invite you to pass the peace in the ways that are natural and blessed for you.
Thomas Mitchell Roan, Martha Schick, John Sinclair, Rebecca Lynn Solar, Zoe Annalise Towler, Ellie Thurgood Devalle, and J.J. Warren. Let's acknowledge our class. The students entering the Master of Theological Studies program are Amanda Coate, Sarah Ford, Elizabeth Brady Harper, Sean O'Helam Jacobs, Marcos Antonio Juliao, Nathaniel Palmer Kruger, John Pazia, Thomas Herbert Lee Jr., Elias Mateo Lucero, John Matthias Matthew, John Philip McClintock, Brian Opati Amuso, Brianna Lynn Porter, Damaris Istel Posadas, and Obi Winod Sianipar. Let us acknowledge our MTS. The students entering the Master of Sacred Theology program are Tris L. Ingalls, Huewan Lee, Jainam Ro, Samuel Song, Yuling Wang, and Nona Margaret Rudel. Let us acknowledge them. The students entering the Distance Education Doctor of Ministry program are Julie Lynn Cedrone, Aretha Renee Fluker, Dana Lee Gonzalez, Priscilla Ann Lawrence, Brock Hutchison Leach, Richard Martin, Kenneth Narvell Moore, Brent Andrew Newbury, Henry Onusoro Obuji, John Ross Jr., and Amy Schumacher. And the students entering the Doctor of Philosophy program are Connie Unje Gong, James Brumbaugh, Britta Marie Myers Carlson, Angel Bernice Christine Clark, Morgan Cramago, Gregory Vaughn Nelson, Taylor Thomas, Stephen Waldron, and Ceylon Wong. We also want to acknowledge as a group all the students who entered the School of Theology in the spring 2019 class. So if you entered your program in last spring, if you would please stand now together and be acknowledged. Congratulations again to all of our entrance students.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My pleasure to introduce to you new faculty, staff, and administration at the School of Theology. I'll first introduce the faculty, and please hold your applause until I have named them all, and if you're present, please stand. We're happy to welcome Dr. Gary Dorian, Visiting Professor of Social Ethics, Dr. Felipe Maya, Assistant Professor of Theology, Dr. Luis Menendez Antuña, Assistant Professor of New Testament. Welcome. We also welcome new staff and administration, or those who have changed roles over the last year. If you are present, please stand, and at the conclusion, let's greet them. Diane Atui, Administrative Coordinator, Finance and Administration. Gretchen Brown, Admission Coordinator. Jada Gonzalez Justiniano, Senior Program Coordinator, Office of Contextual Education. Maddie Henderson, Admissions Officer. Andrew Kimball, Assistant Director of Alumni and Donor Relations. Katie O'Neill, Financial Aid Officer and Advanced Standing Coordinator. Casey Norman, Executive Assistant to the Dean. And Sangwon Yang, Registrar. Welcome.
Good morning. On behalf of the Office of Alumni Development, I'd like to especially welcome our alumni who are gathered here with us today. Normally, we begin this time by recognizing those celebrating their 50th class reunion, but due to various health concerns, members of the class of 1969 cannot physically be here with us today. Let's be sure to keep them in prayer. We do have members here from the class of 1959 and 1954 celebrating their 60th and 65th class reunions, and these are milestones worth honoring. Let's give them a hand. When your name is called, please come forward to be recognized if you are able, and remain standing until all names have been called. Tom Sears, Bob Lane, Robert Campbell, Howard and Doris Hunter, and John Neck. Please come forward. Thank you. As they take their seats, we'd now like to ask those who graduated more than 50 years ago to please stand and remain standing so we can give you a round of applause. May those who graduated between the years 1970 and 1979 please stand and remain standing or raise your hand. May those who graduated between the years 1980 and 1989 please stand and remain standing or raise your hand. May those who graduated between the years 1990 and 1999 please stand or raise your hand. May those who graduated between the years 2000 and 2009 please stand and remain standing or raise your hand. And lastly, those who finished between the years 2010 and 2019, would you please stand for raise your hand? And to all of our alumni, welcome home.
As a graduate of PhD 50 years ago, I'm delighted to be able to present the names of the winners of the 2019 Distinguished Alumni Awards. First of all, I'd like to present the Reverend Dr. William Alberts. Bill earned his doctorate from the Boston University School of Theology in 1961. He is a profound author and minister grounded in prophetic and pastoral ministry. He regularly writes articles for the United Methodist Insight and the website Counterpunch. Reverend Dr. Alberts is a former hospital chaplain at the Boston Medical Center, both a Unitarian Universalist and a United Methodist minister. His book, The Counterpunching Minister Who Couldn't Be Prayed Away, and I urge you to read more details in your program about his story of being excluded from the United Methodist ministry by being forcibly retired. In this book, he published his story, and in a new book that's about to be published, he's going to talk about what it was like to be extinguished, to come to this day and be distinguished by Boston University. Dr. Alberts is also the author of A Hospital Chaplain at the Crossroads of Humanity, which a book reviewed in the Pastoral Care and Counseling Journal said demonstrated what top-notch pastoral care looks like, feels like, and maybe even smells like. He's a diplomat of the College of Pastoral Supervision and Psychotherapy. He has 5 children, 7 grandchildren, and 6 great children. He and his wife Eva live here in Canton, Massachusetts. Dr. Alberts. The Right Reverend Ian Douglas earned his PhD from Boston University in 1993. A priest and a missionary and the 15th Bishop Diocesan of the Episcopal Church in Connecticut, he serves approximately 168 parishes and faith communities in the state of Connecticut. Elected to the office in October of 2009, he was ordained bishop in April of 2010. From 1989 to 2010, he was a faculty member at the Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he was professor of mission and world Christianity. Bishop Douglas also served as priest associate at St. James Episcopal Church in Cambridge from 1989 to 2010. He's worked as a volunteer for mission in the Episcopal Church of Haiti and an associate for overseas leadership development at the Episcopal Church Center in New York. He's a member of the Executive Council of the Episcopal Church and chair of the Standing Commission on World Mission. Bishop Douglas is the past convener of the Episcopal Seminary Consultation on Mission and and a founder of Episcopalians for Global Reconciliation. A sought-after speaker nationally and internationally, he's the author and editor of 4 books and numerous academic and popular articles on the topics of mission, the mission church, contemporary Anglicanism, and world Christianity. Bishop Douglas has also studied at Middlebury College, Harvard University, and Harvard Divinity School. Bishop Douglas. Our third recipient is the Reverend Patricia Thompson, who earned a Master of Divinity degree from the Boston University School of Theology in 1986. She's currently a retired elder of the New England Conference of the United Methodist Church, where she serves 1/4 time as co-pastor in charge of administration and local church historian for the Wolcott United Methodist Church in Wolcott, Vermont. She also serves as historian for the New England Conference and edits a quarterly newsletter entitled The New England United Methodist Messenger. She's also the editor of Historian's Digest, the newsletter for the Historical Society of the United Methodist Church. In 2016, she was the recipient of the Distinguished Service Award presented by the General Commission on Archives and History of the United Methodist Church. She grew up in Morrisville, Vermont, and graduated from People's Academy in Morrisville in 1963. In 1967, she graduated from the University of Vermont with a BS in Home Economics with a specialty in social work. The Reverend Patricia Thompson. Unfortunately, our 4th recipient could not be present today, Reverend Dr. Patrick Reyes, who earned a Master of Divinity degree from Boston University School of Theology. He's a Latinist practical theologian, educator, administrator, and institutional strategist. He's the author of the book Nobody Cries When We Die, Community, God, and the Surviving to Adulthood. The work explores the role of stories of violence and vocational discernment. He's a director of strategic partnerships for doctoral initiatives at the Forum for Theological Exploration, formerly called the Fund for Theological Education. He is the first Latinx director of the doctoral initiatives, which celebrated 50 years of supporting scholars of color through fellowships in 2018. His portfolio includes oversight of annual grant funding to create conditions for scholars and students of color to thrive in theological education through fellowships, partnerships, and grants in theological education. He collaborates and works with leaders of institutions, foundations, and other paramount academic organizations in theological and higher education to build their capacity and transform theological schools and programs for the 21st century. In 2000 and 2018, he was recognized as a great teacher and preacher of the Children's Defense Fund, along with persons such as Boston University's own graduate, Reverend James Lawson, and Taylor Branch, the MacArthur Genius Grant and Pulitzer Prize-winning author. Reverend Reyes earned also a doctorate and master's from Claremont School of Theology. Let us greet him even though he is not present. Thank you.
I was reminded that we actually had another staff member join us who was just hired this last week, and we didn't make her name into the bulletin. Christina Richardson is here, our new senior program director.
Our first scripture reading this morning is a responsible reading from Psalm 42, verses 1 through 4. Please join me as printed in your bulletin. Happy are those whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Happy are those to whom the Lord imputes no iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. For day and night your hand weighed heavy upon me. My strength was dried up as by the heat of summer. Our second reading this morning is from Romans chapter 8, verses 18 through 31. Let me read this in the Revised Standard Version. I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subject to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in hope we are saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what is seen? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we ought, but that very Spirit intercedes with us too deep for words. And God, who searches the heart, knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for saints according to the will of God. We know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn within a large family. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. And those whom he justified, he also glorified. What then are we to say about these things? If God is for us, who is against us? This is the word of the Lord.
Dean Moore, faculty, new faculty, visiting faculty, especially my good friend, Gary Doran, to students, new and returning, our celebrated alumni, I'm glad to be numbered in that crowd, members of our advisory board, friends, I'm going to lie to you again, I won't hold you long. In the fall of 2016, two events occurred 2 days apart that had a tremendous impact on my emotional and social mindscape, and quite frankly, on my theological perspective on suffering and hope. They were moments when I could not speak. I wanted to speak, but could not find the words to say or to describe what I felt. Have you ever felt that way? That you should say something, but could not find the words. Lovers know about that. Friends who want to help their friend, but it's too dangerous to maybe speak, understand that. I think it's a lot like the Baptist preacher, this story you've heard, who was out fishing with one of his deacons. The deacon hooked a huge fish, but when his line broke and he lost it, he responded with a colorful stream of profanity. The preacher stopped him, reminded him that he was a leader of the church, and urged him to exercise some self-control. As soon as the deacon apologized and settled down, the preacher caught a bigger fish than he and the deacon managed to wrestle alongside of the boat. But the preacher's pole groaned and split under the weight of the huge fish as it fell back into the water. The preacher and the deacon watched the biggest fish either of them had ever hooked swimming away. They turned and looked at each other, and the deacon said, "Pastor, excuse me for what I'm about to say. I know what you said about self-control, but at a time like this, somebody ought to say something." The first event for me was November the 8th, 2016, the election of the 45th President of the United States. I watched the polling results, as many of you did, with surprise, anxiety, a churning of the inwards, and finally in disbelief, or I simply did not want to believe what was happening. Yet I knew all along that this terrible thing could happen. For those of us who suffer with chronic diseases that alert us through pain, we know something about this feeling. I have been a gout sufferer most of my adult life. I do not pray gout even on my worst enemies. Medication, diet, and physical exercise help me to manage it without severe pain, most of the time. But when I awaken, I am aware of the reddening of the flesh and the throbbing pain which affects my toes and lower extremities. It's not full-blown then, but I know that unless I deal with it right away, my moment of reckoning is quickly coming. And when it strikes, there are no words for the pain. In fact, I can't even talk about it. I just groan. If you live here on the planet with the rest of us, there are things, events, and persons in this life who will make you groan. Groaning denotes a deep, inarticulate sound, most often expressing derision, distress, disapproval, and often desire. Groaning is not limited to human sounds. Sometimes it refers to a low creaking sound made by an object under pressure, like the preacher's fishing pole. I remember a time I was working in my attic years ago in Nashville, and the floor gave a huge groaning noise and crumbled, and my legs went dangling through the ceiling. I went to bed on the night of November the 8th before the final votes were tallied, and I woke up the next morning, November 9th, in a surreal, emotional, and social universe stripped to a sense of anomie and loss of word, without the capacity of speech. Oh, I made several sounds that were open for signification and different readings, but they could not produce intelligible verbal utterances even when they were ready to speak. I realized, Eileen, I was just groaning. And I've been groaning ever since. I don't think I'm alone. I think others are groaning. In fact, I think everybody is groaning. So I'm going to give you a chance in the middle of this service to get it out. Just groan with me for a minute. Say, Some of us here this morning are groaning about the coming semester with all of its challenges and ambiguities. Personal challenges, health challenges, financial challenges, relationship challenges, tenure reviews, the hiring of new faculty and a new dean, groaning. Some are worried about exams, writing papers, ministry projects, and oh Lordy, completing dissertations and manuscripts. These are things, my brothers and sisters, that will make you Some today are groaning in hope and anticipation of May 2020, just wanting all of this to be over. I think groaning is a metaphor for our times. But this morning I'm concerned about a very specific question that pertains to groaning. Please bear with me. I didn't ask you all to take up 45 minutes before I got up. I'm going to try to make this short. But I'm a slow talker. I'm Southern. And I just can't make all of those words go like that. What can we say when speech, rational discourse, has reached its limits and it groans? Yet everybody is still talking. Corey Lewandowski yesterday at the House Judiciary Committee was just talking, and all of the committee, they were talking, but nothing really happened. They were just talking. This kind of reminds me of Dorothy Zoll's reflection on a character in Samuel Beckett's play, Happy Days. The character was Winnie. She was a woman of about 50. That's the kind of other thing that goes on. But the story. Zoll writes in the first act as Winnie is buried in sand up to her waist. Nonetheless, she chatters away, brushes her teeth, rummages about in her handbag, and feels sorry for her husband. In the second act, she's buried up to her chin and can no longer move her head. All relationships are severed. But the stream of idle chatter in which she takes herself so seriously rolls on and on. Zoll says that is a kind of death. That is what hell is like, being buried in sand, chattering on and on, unable to change things. What can we say then? School of Theology, School of the Prophets, to echo the apostles' rhetorical refrain in Romans 8. Or to put it another way, is there anything to say that has not been said? Can Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Andrew Yang, Cory Booker, Amy Klobuchar, Julian Castro, and Beto O'Rourke say more than has already been said about a greedy and transient gun lobby that is responsible for the horrible bone-wrenching mass murders in places like the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, the Pulse Lounge in Orlando, Mother Emanuel in Charleston, South Carolina, the Walmart store in El Paso, the Parkland High School in Florida, Sandy Hook Elementary School in New Jersey, and the everyday gun violence that has become a veritable wild, wild west all across urban America. What can we say then? What more can we say then about a ravenous fossil fuel industry that has a chokehold on the suffering environment and cowering politicians? What can we say about a failed health system and corrupt pharmaceutical industry that are driven by profit and not by care? What can we say about a mass incarceration industry that locks up poor black, brown, and white bodies while Wall Street white-collar criminals lock down billions of dollars in private equity financial networks, where rich movie stars get 14 days in jail, a modest fine, and community service for committing fraud, and many poor women spend most of their lives in jail for being born brown, black, and female. What can we say about little children who are separated from their parents at a material and ideological border that criminalizes immigrants but ignores the businesses that hire them? Who will speak for them? And what can we say about the subaltern who cannot speak for themselves? Or will we and they just continue to groan? I'm almost there. Or should we not say anything at all? Sometimes we're tempted to remain silent because we are overwhelmed by the multitude of words, drama, and performances of empty sophistry and excessive stylization that are akin to putting on makeup or deciding which costume to wear. And yet we must speak, because silence in the face of imminent danger is dangerous and costly. It is like the proverbial ostrich that hides his head in the sand and pretends nothing is happening. We know what that looks like. Some members of Congress and high-rolling church leaders should take heed, because when you hide your head in the sand, far more is exposed than is hidden. Silence is not the answer. The psalmist writes, "When I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long." Last month, during my birthday, August 26, 27, I celebrate both of these and the rest of the week. But last month, on August 26, 27, the G7 leaders gathered for a meeting on climate change, and Donald Trump was silent. His empty chair, not Obama's, was a sign of the dangerous, debilitating, and destructive alliances that he and his silent administration have made with the greedy, grinning gods of industry. His chair was empty while fires were and still are consuming the earth's lungs in the Amazon, while wildfires are ablaze in most of our western and northwestern states and territories. His empty chair sat there while the polar caps were melting in Antarctica, Alaska, and Greenland. His chair is still empty while islands like Puerto Rico and the Bahamas are feeling the wrath of a world on fire. Indeed, America is a fire culture. It worships fire gods. I'm letting that sink in. And sacrifices its children on their altars. We have a pyromaniac in the White House whose adolescent needs for speed and firepower makes him saber rattle with Orion today, causes him to ignore the groanings of millions of people in this country, around the globe, and throughout creation. In fact, creation is on fire, and she's groaning. An old African-American spiritual asked, "Oh, sinner, what you gonna do when the world's on fire?" I'm skipping a section. In 1918, at the close of World War I, a rural Swiss pastor was groaning because of the contradictions he saw in the liberal Protestant theology and the religious socialism of his day. He noticed that many of his fellow citizens and neighboring countries were becoming more militaristic, and that many of his former professors were becoming supportive of this movement, which would in time cover Europe and the world in a sea of blood and hatred. So he decided to return to the scriptures, which is our text. Karl Barth wrote in the epistle to the Romans, "If we fix our eyes upon the place where the course of the world reaches its lowest point, where its vanity is unmistakable, where its groanings are most bitter, and the divine incognito most impenetrable, we shall encounter there Jesus Christ." I've thought about this in a world where we're careful with this Christocentric stuff. I know I am, and God knows I study Howard Thurman. But I'm listening to Barth now. I hear his line from those Alpine sweeps in a different way. Where shall we encounter this Christ that Barth points us to in our day, when strange and bizarre machinations are on parade again? When a new breed of Nazis shout blood and soil, kill the Jews, niggers go back to Africa. And our president is equivocal, silent, and more comfortable with dictators than he is with Democrats. Where shall the church, the ecclesia, find this Christ? Will it be in spaces where we claim revelations and visitations, signs and sacraments, rites and practices, and prophetic pronouncements of judgment and hope? Or will it be in movements that do not look like the traditional church? I don't know. I have some hunches. But wherever we find this Christ, however you're defining this Christ, it will be at, and this is for the philosophers here, Kevin, it will be at the epistemologically opposed and the existentially tense crossings of our groanings and hopings. New students, that just means at the cross at the cross. Speaking about and embodying this kind of groaning and hoping will not be easy for the church. In fact, it will be hard and costly because it means joining creation in the struggle to bring to birth something new and creative out of the suffering and chaos of our time. This struggle is not for vain practitioners of a distorted American civil religion who wave the flag higher than they hold the cross. This is not a struggle for the debonair peddlers of cheap grace in many of our liberal and mainline churches and seminaries who talk the talk but don't walk the walk, who talk a good game about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but when their interests are threatened, they go underground and around town and sow seeds of dissent. This kind of groaning and hoping is not for many of our white evangelical brothers and sisters who wag their tails at the master's appointments of federal and Supreme Court judges and militaristic campaigns to make America white again. This is not for certain black and brown religious leaders who curtsy for favors and grin and bow to a madman in the house that race built. This man who led the birtherism campaign against Barack Obama, who called for the execution of the Central Park Five and declared African nations holes for defecation. Oh no, this struggle is not for those who groan in silence and make quick retreat to the corridors of comfort and convenience when the real defecation hits the fan. Groaning and hoping are dangerous and costly. I'm almost there. You know, I grew up in a little storefront church, Centennial Missionary Baptist Church, 824 East 43rd Street in Chicago. Mostly immigrants from the Deep South were there in search of the Promised Land. We were groaning and hoping in the exile. It was quite a marvelous combination of suffering, despair, and hope. These were people whose language was imprisoned and their words circumscribed by law, norms, customs, and violence. Unable to freely express the awful bondage and trauma enacted on their bodies and souls. Yet they performed something utterly miraculous. They took the religion that their masters disgraced and made it a vessel for the redemption of their bodies. I'm still trying to get over that, Gary. They took the symbol of the cross that was enacted over and over again in the form of lynching trees, burnings at the stake, Jim Crow laws, segregation statutes, political, physical, and psychic suffering, and through some strange alchemy of their broken bodies and tortured souls, made it out of a sign of hope. Maybe this is what Mobley means by negation of negation. I don't know. All I know that through their improvisational artistry, they took their groanings and mixed them with their desire and determination for freedom, and out of their mouths and their hearts came sounds and songs that empowered a mass movement that changed the history of the world. They sang, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they hung him to the tree? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Sometimes I feel discouraged and think my work's in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. Oh, there is a balm in Gilead. Oh, I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Turn me around, turn me around. I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, walking up to freedom land. How could these black and unknown bards sing these songs in a strange land? How could they groan these words in the midst of worlds shattered? What can we learn from them and others for this time, for this critical impasse in our lives and the lives of people around the world? How shall we at the School of Theology testify with our bodies in these spaces of death, where they, even though they didn't have words, reached into the depths of their troubled souls and found a way to groan and hope? I did mention there were two events in November 2016. On November the 10th, 2 days after the presidential election, I was awakened early in the morning by a phone call from my son, Clinton. He said, "Dad, we're at the hospital. Nassim, my daughter-in-law, was in labor." Without a moment's hesitation, without thought of the blessed counsel of my beloved who was out of town, I literally flew to the hospital. In that one bright, God-scented, infinitesimal moment, I forgot about everything but the arrival of our new grandchild. When I arrived at the hospital, I sat with my son and Nassim and with their parents from early morning until late that evening, as we waited in anticipation for the moment. We held hands and prayed as Nassim made those groaning sounds and took labored breaths that were a prelude to a new dimension of our lives together. Our beautiful gift of a son and a grandson called Zane. We experienced in that moment what Howard Thurman calls the growing edge. In closing today, I leave his words with you. Look well to the growing edge. All around us, worlds are dying and new worlds are being born. All around us, life is dying and life is being born. The fruit ripens on the tree. The roots are silently at work in the darkness of the earth against the time when there shall be new leaves, fresh blossoms, green fruit. Such is the growing edge. It is the extra breath from the exhausted lung, the one more thing to try when all else has failed, the upward reach of life when weariness closes in upon all endeavor. This is the basis of hope in moments of despair, the incentive to carry on when times are out of joint and men and women have lost their reason, the source of confidence when worlds crash and dreams whiten into ash, the birth of a child, life's most dramatic answer to death. This is the growing edge incarnate. Look well to the growing edge. As a benediction, I know that in the days and weeks and months and even the years ahead, it may not get better. In fact, I'm not feeling good about what's coming. But I want you to remember there's a growing edge. I know that there are difficult days ahead for this nation, for our children, and our children's children, for the church. But there's a growing edge. Remember this, that the answers we seek, the courage that we so desperately need, the peace that we so intimately desire and pray for ourselves, for our children and their children, and the new heaven and the new earth about which the prophets dream, are coiled up in the belly of our groaning and hoping. And remember, when we feel that we've reached the limits of speech, when we feel discouraged and think our work's in vain, that there's a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. Let us leave this place with a renewed hope and a commitment to put our bodies on the line and to pick up the cross however you understand it, and let your body talk. Amen.
Amen.
Friends, won't you pray with me? Almighty and all-loving God, we entered into this sanctuary with praise on our lips and thanksgiving in our hearts. We thank you, God, for these students that now embark upon this journey that you have sent their feet to. We thank you, God, for these alumni who have come back to this place of formation to honor this place from which you sent them into the world to make a difference. We thank you for their witness. We thank you for their wisdom. We thank you, God, for the gift of this community into which we have come from far-flung places. Some have crossed over hills and valleys and mountains to be here. Some have crossed oceans. God, we thank you for ordaining this time, this place, and this community for us to come together. We thank you for the joys. We thank you for the gifts that you will bestow on this community as we embark upon another academic year. But God, in this moment, we come not only with thanksgiving, but with groaning. We come into this space, God, groaning from the weight of the world on our shoulders and in our minds. Some of us are groaning in mourning for the loss of loved ones. And we smile and pretend it's okay, but we are still groaning. Some of us are groaning because we are longing for the warm embrace of those we have left behind, who are sacrificing in order for us to be here. Some of us are groaning, God, because we do not know if this is the place where we ought to be. God, we are groaning when we think about all that confronts us and faces us. When we think about all of the ugliness in the world, how devastating the challenges that we face. But in this time of groaning, God, we pray for forgiveness. We pray that you would forgive us for the sin of forgetfulness. We ask that you forgive us for forgetting about hope. We ask that you forgive us in those moments when we forget that you are love and that love is enough. Dip us down into your wellspring of love, oh God. Let us find there a peace that passes all understanding. Let us find in your love a joy unspeakable. Let us find within your wellspring of love a righteous discontent that causes us to boldly confront all that will come against your love and justice. Give us, God, this hope that allows us to resist despair and doubt. This is our prayer for this year. Hear our prayer. Hear our groanings. Hear our song. For we resist, we refuse to let hatred in. We rise up, we won't back down. We're in this till the end. We resist, we refuse do this? Okay, let us stand. I will fly in the greatness of God, even as the Marsh hen flies, filling all the space which the marsh and the skies. God is not finished with creation, though she groans. God is not finished with us, though we groan. Amen.